In our current context, Christianity is so fragmented between so many different denominations. It's very easy to point out our differences, right? It's very easy for us to point out our doctrinal differences, our methodologies, etc. It's really hard to find common ground. And I think that what I've been so grateful for here in Brevard County is that there are a good handful of people that are unity-minded, that really would like to see the churches in a big C kind of way, to be more unified, to be more collaborative in doing the work of Jesus, both growing kingdom and serving those in need.
Welcome back to the Christians of Brevard Pastor Podcast. I'm here with Jose Ferrer of Space Coast Church in West Melbourne. The church was formed in Brevard County in 2016 with the support of their sister congregation in Orlando, the Orlando Church of Christ. They take to heart the command of Christ to make disciples of all nations and strive to create a multicultural community of authentic believers and to witness the entire Space Coast be transformed by the life-changing reality of the gospel. Jose became the full-time minister at Space Coast Church in January of 2021, and prior to that, he served in youth, young adult, and family ministry positions at Orlando Church of Christ. How you doing, Jose?
I'm doing well, Connor. Thank you.
So it's going to be a few weeks before this podcast actually airs, but I know we just finished up the 321 Fest, which was a big effort of multiple churches here in Brevard County, and you were pretty involved with that, I believe, right?
Yes, that's correct. It was a great event.
Did you find some engagement with your church, your congregation, coming out to 321 Fest?
Sure. So my participation in the Love Brevard group, which helped organize and work behind the scenes for the 321 Fest, and subsequently the last 3 years, this is the third year in a row we've been working together on cooperative efforts. The last 2 years was a lot of community outreach at two different Community of Hope locations where we did a lot of really service for the community. And this year's event for 321 Fest was more geared towards evangelism, making disciples, sharing the gospel, and creating just a fun environment for people to bring their families, a fun, safe environment to bring their families. My motivation for participating in this effort and really connecting is what I see in John 17 when Jesus is praying for us to be unified. I think that for us and in our current context, year 2025, it's crazy to think of how much time has gone by of me just being a disciple. But in our current context, our Christianity is so fragmented between so many different denominations and everything, and where it's very easy to point out our differences, right? It's very easy for us to point out our doctrinal differences, the way our methodologies, etc. It's really hard to find common ground. And I think that what I've been so grateful for here in Brevard County is that there are a good handful of people that are unity-minded, that really would like to see the churches in a big C kind of way, to be more unified, to be more collaborative in doing the work of Jesus in both growing kingdom and serving those in need. And so what I love about this cooperative is that we've been able to find some common ground, especially when it comes to meeting the needs of people in the community. And so that was kind of my main drive. And being a part of the restoration movement, we do, as we make disciples, we take, as you shared in the intro, we do take it very seriously, the idea that we see in the scriptures about making disciples, baptizing them for the forgiveness of their sins and for them to receive the Holy Spirit, and then teaching them to obey what Jesus taught. And so this very relational, walking with one another way of experiencing the gospel and the kingdom is what we strive for. And so that's kind of some of the background and a little bit of my motivation for helping out with 321.
Yeah, you touched on a couple of things that I wanted to maybe expand on a little bit in this podcast. So you did mention the efforts in the community. I know Space Coast Church really sees that mission to be the hands and the heart of Christ out in the community. You guys see that as a very important thing. So besides Love Brevard, Love Inc., I know you guys do this monthly, you call it Service Sunday, and your whole congregation goes out to various different retirement communities, Daily Bread. some other communities who maybe wouldn't traditionally make it to a four-walled church, and you go serve and bring Christ to them. How did that develop?
So yeah, thanks for asking about that, because it's something that's very near and dear to us. I can give you a little bit of background for me personally in my own faith journey, and then how all of this kind of came to be here. So for me, just as I, became a disciple and started walking, following Jesus, some of the things that I noticed in the gospel and the way that Jesus led and leads and calls others is to be a servant. He examples that. He says, the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to offer himself as a ransom for many, as we see in Mark 10. And that really, hit me in my own faith and the kinds of things. I made some decisions early on that when I got into leadership, that I would be a servant leader. Jesus said, he also said that those of us who want to be great, the greatest among us would be the servant of all. And so I really strive to serve and find opportunities to do so. And for me personally, as I read scriptures like Matthew 25, where, Jesus honors and blesses those who took care of different needs, like, you know, serving the poor and visiting those in prison, giving the sick, taking care of the sick, those kinds of things. And he gives them the great reward of eternity. And those who did all those things were wondering, like, Lord, what are you talking about? When did we ever do this for you? And he says that when you did it for the least of these, you were doing it for me. And so again, there's this motivation that I've had to find ways to serve in the community. And so as a minister in Orlando, one day I was able to connect with a children's home. Another member of the church who has a heart for mission work. He has a heart for caring for those in need. And he had been trying to get me to go for a long time, and I was very resistant. And then finally, as a minister, I realized, okay, I definitely need to go. We organized a teen event there, and we served at the youth home. And it was a little conversation. I was sitting with a young man, a beautiful little kid, just captured my heart. A little young guy named Joshua, and we sat down, we ate lunch together, and then we were having cookies. And he said, and I told him, I said, "Oh man, we need some milk. We're having chocolate chip cookies. We need some milk." And he got a little sad. He says, "Yeah, we don't have any milk." And I was like, "What? You need milk with cookies?" Just kind of played it off. But later I had a conversation with the house father, and I asked him about that. And he says, "Yeah, that's one of the things, because of our finances and stuff, and having 20 kids in the home. It was just one of the things that they weren't a luxury that they weren't able to afford." And I just was taken aback by that. And so I made a small decision, talked to my wife about it. And so from that following Friday, and for 4 years straight, I would bring 5 gallons and then eventually 6 gallons of milk each week for the house there. And what it did was more than just meeting a need, right? It met a small need that these kids needed, and that the house parents were very grateful for. But it opened up also a door for relationships, and I got to know these kids, and I got to know the house parents, and it opened up doors for ministry that I didn't even think at the time about. And when they did present themselves, was able to step into that. So that was kind of in my heart, and things that I had put into practice in Orlando. When I came to lead the church here, was trying to figure out ways to serve. And my neighbor across the street was able to introduce me to a food pantry, and I was able to serve every week alongside one of my brothers here that I invited to come out, and he and I would go and serve every Friday at the pantry. And so this was a very personal way of me living out what I see in the scriptures to try to live out Matthew 25. And I really hadn't thought much beyond that. It wasn't until we had a leadership meeting here in Florida, or in Melbourne, for all the Florida churches. And one of the brothers who was a liaison for Hope Worldwide, a charity that our Florida churches, all the international churches of Christ support, and it's a global charity that does a lot of great work all over the world. Anyways, there's one guy who was affiliated with him at the time. He came, his name's Reese, and he came and he shared this story about this church in Fairfax, Alaska, who was a small church and kind of an aging church, and really trying to figure out, how do we engage the youth? How do we grow? And they were hitting a bunch of walls in different areas. So for themselves, what they had decided to do was they decided to take their small groups, which a lot of our churches like ours here in Space Coast are really designed around the small groups. And so each of our members belong to smaller groups, and those small groups is where we really get to live out the one another passages, things of caring about one another and confessing sin, getting to pray and celebrate, break bread, all of the fun things too. And so they took their small groups, and each of their small groups would find some sort of charity that they could serve in. And what they found quickly is that where it was a challenge to invite people to church for a myriad of reasons. People have their reasons for not wanting to attend, but it was very easy for the church members to get their friends, neighbors, coworkers to join them in serving in the community. And so what they found over time is that they get all these great people out to serve in the community. And as those visitors in serving in that capacity were exposed to disciples of Jesus living out their faith in extraordinary ways, made the Bible very real. And so a lot of people started becoming disciples of Jesus simply because of this church's act of faith. Well, after hearing that story, I was absolutely inspired, and it touched so many chords deep inside my own heart with, wanting to make disciples, wanting to grow the kingdom, and at the same time, wanting to see us being the loving hands and feet of Jesus in our community around us. And so I brought these ideas to our leadership group, and it was a challenge at first trying to figure out how to make it work. We tried to do what they did up in Fairfax by, organizing and connecting with different charities. And in Brevard County, there are a lot of charities. There's a lot of 501(c)(3)s, a lot of different organizations that you can get out and join to really serve in the community. This is a pretty extraordinary place. I'm very grateful for that. But it was a challenge for us to try to figure out, what does it look like for us here as the Space Coast Church to serve the Space Coast community? And eventually, with all the challenges that we were facing, I thought about it one day, and I was like, well, everybody gets up to go to church on Sunday anyway. And for all of my members that were really having a hard time trying to figure out how to make it work during the week, I said, why don't we just give up a normal Sunday and we'll go out and serve in the community. Coincidentally, maybe by the Spirit, since we were just coming out of COVID, there was a lot of these assisted living facilities that were not getting visitors. People weren't coming because there was a large period of time when nobody was allowed to go. But even as those restrictions were being lifted, there was a lot of these assisted living facilities that these old folks they weren't getting visitors. They weren't getting attention, and a lot of people weren't able to minister to them. And so they were very just open to having church groups, faith groups come in and serve. And so as I reached out to these different assisted living facilities, we were able to design where we would go once a month and do like a miniature version of our church service where we sing songs and we do a message and we offer communion to those who would like to partake. And that was it. No offering plate, no other things, but really just opening the door for the gospel. But then afterwards, to really engage with the residents and get to know them, learn their stories, play board games with them, do crafts. And so I have so many stories of great moments where members of my church were able to really connect and have been connecting with the residents and building some great relationships. And so that's how that got started. We decided on the second Sunday every month, and we had five locations to start. Then we added a sixth assisted living facility, and then we got the daily bread, and we're able to serve the homeless. So we, on that Sunday, we were able to serve well over 100 meals. We partnered with Daily Bread to make that happen, and then at our house, we do what we call Messy Church. And Messy Church is because there's a lot of families with young children, and it's inappropriate. This is not good environments for them to be in, like at the homeless shelters, whatever. But we decided to do what we call Messy Church, and that is a kid focused church time where it's, you're doing songs that are geared towards the children. We're doing a lesson that's geared towards them and communicates the gospel in a very kid friendly way. I'll do a short abbreviated communion thought for the adults so that we can focus in on what we need to about Jesus as we take communion. And then we'll do crafts. We play games. We eat snacks. And so it's all very messy and a lot of fun, and really just helping young families to know how to engage with their children and sharing the gospel in that way. And so that's what our service Sunday has come to be. This June will be 3 years that we've been serving in this way. And so for for 3 years, the second Sunday every month. This is what we do, and it's been an incredible thing.
Yeah, and I imagine that it's really been something. Dedicating that one Sunday a month has been something that's allowed your church to maybe reach above its size in the community. I know you've told me before that you consider maybe a little bit of a smaller church. I was there; it really was not that small. I think I commented it to you. But you're meeting at the Cinema World there in West Melbourne. So you don't really have the facility to maybe have a permanent food pantry or some of the other ministries that different churches try to use as their way to impact outside the four walls. But through this, you guys are really able to reach out and, do in many ways, probably more than some of these larger churches, just by dedicating that time, because it's really time more than anything, right? Time more than resources that's needed. Do you find some of your church growth maybe has come from people and maybe you're seeing you guys out there and they're coming from that?
Yeah, I think we have definitely made an impact on the visitors. The largest amount of visitors that we have on any time of the year, it's always on the service Sunday. We'll have anywhere from from the 6 locations. Well, yeah, 6 locations that we have now. We're anywhere from 12 to 20 visitors that would come out on any one of those days, and the impact that it's had, and the people that have decided to either reconnect or connect with the church has been very, very cool. I think the biggest thing that I've seen is how it's helped our members to really grow and mature in their own faith, and it's given them purpose. Where in a typical Sunday, there's definitely a lot for people to do. There's needs for greeters and ushers and sound tech and worship leaders, and then of course those that are coming up front to speak, myself and others. But those are limited roles. Even we have a fellowship table, where people can get snacks and things. There's still a limited amount of availability for people to serve and to find their place, right? Service Sunday changes everything, because with all those different locations, now there's more people needed in all of those spaces, and so we have a very strong participation rate. About 80% of our members go, and so currently we're at 70, just over 70 members, and any given Sunday can be maybe 100 people are participating in our Sunday service. But on service Sundays, because of our locations and the amount of people that attend, the residents that come attend the service, the amount of people that we feed at the homeless center, it's well over 300 people that get connection on those Sundays. And so the leveraging of the membership and what who we're able to serve is incredible on those days. And so that's where I think is the most impact. And one thing that I learned some years ago in a book by Andy Stanley, talking about how we grow our churches and some of the models and stuff. And anyways, there was one line that he said in there that really kind of hit me in my core. And it was, if your church disappeared today, would anyone notice? And I really took that to heart. And I'm happy to say today, because of Christ, this is all Jesus and the Holy Spirit, but our partnership with the Holy Spirit and the things that we're doing, I know today very well that if the Space Coast Church disappeared today, tomorrow people would be like, hey, where did they go? And that's very cool, because I know we're making an impact.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Maybe we jump back a little bit. We kind of jump straight into it. Do you know a little bit about the history of what led to the founding of the church here in 2016?
Yeah. So, I am very aware of the planting and how Space Coast came to be. So the Orlando church, there was a group of folks here in Brevard County that were a part of the Orlando church, and they were a small house church. They were between 12 and 15 members, and they were faithful. They would come, drive over from the coast to Orlando to one of our services every weekend, those who could make it, with dreams, hopes, and prayers of one day having their own church. And that went on for about, during my awareness of it, that was going on for about 15 years.
Mm.
So, a lot of people, some move-ins, move-outs and stuff like that, but they always had this dream. And I sat down after I got on staff. I sat down with the lead evangelist, JP Tynes, and I was talking to him about it. I said, we take up a special offering every year. Every year, our churches would take up a special, we call it a special offering, where we would gather funds to fund specific charities and missions. And so the Orlando church would, a church membership of 700, we would raise, well over $200,000 at this effort. And a lot of that monies would go to South America missions. A lot of it would go to Caribbean missions. And then we had a large portion go to Hope Worldwide, which I mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, what if we, had the congregation pray, and then we added a sum of money for the church planting in Brevard. And if we, let's say we earmark $50,000 over the next 3 years, then that would be $50,000 each year that can be used to plant Brevard. And with $150,000, it should be a very doable thing. And so the evangelist, he loved the idea, and they took it on, and the church board approved it right away. And so the following year, we took up our first collection, and we blew it out. We blew out our goal. And so the 50,000 for Brevard was the initial seed money was there. So they took up that collection. And then in 2015, I was asked to come out here to lead it, to start the church plant. And I said, no, that was not my plan. And I was I was enjoying being the youth and family minister in Orlando. And my own family, my daughter and I had just recently had gotten reunited. That's a whole another wonderful story. But I just felt like I needed to stay there. And Tom and Karma Kuhn, who Tom was close to retirement in his professional career, and they answered the call. And he was an elder in the Orlando church, and a great man of faith who had served in a lot of our different fellowship sister congregations as an elder and different leadership roles. And they took on the mantle, and it was a good choice, because he, in his organizational skills and the different things that he does, he was able to really get the church off the ground and set up the 501(c) and really lay the foundation for the work that we were able to do once I got here. So he had a 5-year plan, and the 5 years, he got here in 2015. They started the church officially in 2016. And by 2020, he was like, okay, I'm ready to pass on this baton. And they put out the call. Many people applied, and I was actually invited to apply, and we mulled it over. I prayed, and my wife was like, you really need to consider this, because this is the second time they're asking you to go. And so I prayed and fasted, and that's how I ended up out here. And so the church plant was from Orlando. We saved the money. We made it happen. It was the second church planting that Orlando had done in those many years, and Claremont being the other one. And so it was just really cool to see how that happened, and how I ended up here after all.
Yeah. Do you like Brevard? What are your thoughts in the community?
I love it.
Okay.
I love living in this community. We found a lot of great folks. The neighborhood I live in, we have a lot of good friendships that we've built, people that we love connecting with, and the community itself is very special. It reminds me of Michigan, in the sense where my dad lives. Small communities that are very friendly. You can talk to people that you haven't met yet, and there's just a very laid back vibe that is really appealing, especially coming from the high paced and seemingly aggravated culture there in Orlando. And I love nature. I'm a day person. I love getting up early. I love all that Brevard County offers in that way. I love being out on the water. I love surfing. Just love being outdoors and riding my motorcycle and things like that. So I really find the community in so many ways, from the amount of charitable, organizations, the way that there just seems to be a pretty amazing spirit and the things that God's doing here. So I'm really grateful that we're here.
As a native Brevardian, that warms my heart. I think a lot of people have a lot of love for this area, and it's great when we can welcome a new church. I mean, it's almost 10 years old now, so I wouldn't say you guys are too new, but it's great to welcome more people who want to support this county and this community and build it up strong as a representation of Christ. Do you want to maybe just share a little bit as maybe this might be the last question? I've spoken now with a couple restorationist churches here in Brevard, and we actually surprisingly have a pretty large restorationist community here. I myself wasn't familiar with the tradition prior to starting the podcast. But now we've had a couple conversations, I know, with Pastor Aaron Holsapple at River Run Christian, Pastor David at City Church in Palm Bay. I think it's very much aligned with some of the projects that we've been attempting to build with Christians of Brevard. It's a unity effort. You guys have a lot of theology and beliefs that really see the unity of the church as a very important thing that we need to restore, right? And that's what restorationism has to do with. Do you want to maybe just provide a little bit of, I guess, how you understand restorationism and what do you see as the vision of the church and how that might relate to Brevard County?
Thank you for asking that, because it is something that's pretty important to me. I from my own church experience, I'd been to several different churches growing up as a young kid, and my grandmother, my heritage is Hispanics, Puerto Rican by descent, and so for a lot of us who grow up Hispanic, Catholicism is a huge tradition woven into our culture. And I found some of that to be challenging. As I began as a young kid, even reading the scriptures, I found some things that were very hard for me to process. Uh, Things that I was like, well, it sounds different in the scriptures than the practical, right? And not to specifically knock them, but it was just from my own experience. I felt like there was just some things that didn't quite align.
Hmm.
Now, being a kid and not knowing much about anything, it wasn't that I did anything with it. It was just an experience that just tucked away. Later on, going to a Pentecostal church, the same thing. There was these flashes and moments where I felt like I really was trying to connect with God, and there were some fundamental things that I learned that were neat. But again, there wasn't a lot of really foundational scriptural ways of engaging my faith that, and again, I'm able to articulate it now looking backwards, but at the time I just didn't really feel like I was connecting. And really at the end of the day, as a kind of disillusioned teenager and young adult, I'd gotten actually to a place where I felt like um, there's a God, but I didn't know if there was a church. And it was really hard for me, and I wrestled for a couple years, and then in my own sin and just life choices, I got to a space where I was like, okay, I need to give God, I need to turn to God. And he was so gracious, and he pointed me to the Orlando church. And, long story short, something that I felt all along was that any church that I would connect to would be really, the Bible had to be a standard. And this was a weird gift from the Lord, because up to that point, the Bible wasn't my standard for sure. But somehow he had planted that idea in my head. And my first church experience, there was a fellow named Richard Rundy who was preaching. He was the lead evangelist for the Orlando church at the time. And I remember that first Sunday, and there was so much scripture shared in that one message, more than I heard in a dozen messages prior to that. And it really moved me. And then after service, something else happened. And that was, people didn't leave. They stuck around, they talked, they engaged in fellowship. And it was so weird, because usually after church, everybody's just rushing out. You got to get to the restaurant. But anyway, so I was very intrigued. And then just after a few weeks, some other situations arose, and I was able to sit down with a guy, and I said, I really would love to be a part of this church. What was really, really cool is he sat down and opened the Bible. He showed me very clearly, my wife, him and his wife, and me and my wife, and some others joined the Bible studies also. But they sat down with me and showed me in the scriptures uh, who God was, and who Jesus is, and what the gospel was, and the response of repentance and baptism, and how important all of these things are, and how much my faith in knowing the scriptures, all of those things were in play. And so for me, it was like I found what I was really longing for, that what God had put in my heart. And so for me, as I relate to the restoration movement, it's really restoring the biblical foundation of the church and really pointing people to the scriptures and allowing the scriptures to dictate our faith instead of traditions. And I know we have a lot of traditions built into our, methodologies, but really what we try to do is to live out the scriptures as best as possible. That's why we call ourselves disciples, because that's what we see in the scriptures over 270 times versus Christian, which is only found in the scripture 3 times. Little things things that seem little, but are actually quite big. We believe that, it's at baptism when a person comes in contact with the blood of Christ and has actually had their sins washed away. Those little nuances, again, they might seem little, but to us, it's very big. And you mentioned a bit ago when you're asking the question about unity, it is a huge deal to us because we do see that this is God's design, that he wants his church, the body, one faith, one baptism. He wants us to be unified. And so we are blessed within our fellowship to have a very strong unity. We are autonomous churches. There is nothing legally binding the Orlando Church to the Space Coast Church to the Anchor Point Church of Tampa or any other churches in Florida or to the world for that matter. But yet we have a very strong fellowship that is unified. And we even attend events with Christian Church, which is kind of our cousins from the Stone Campbell movement. And, it's really cool to see the Restoration movement and how much they really try to adhere to the scriptures. And we all do it as best as we can, right? Because we're still fallible humans just trying to navigate our way. But we're grateful for Jesus and the Holy Spirit and his kingdom and just doing our best.
I know I did say last question, but maybe if I can borrow 1 more minute from you, I think you might have a good answer for this, especially with all the work that you guys do out in the community. But I am kind of curious. You said there's a lot of charities, there's a lot of 501c3s here in Brevard, but from your experience and from all the efforts that you guys help out with, is there one area or some area in Brevard that you think is underserved that more churches could tackle, or you would hopefully like to see more people come on board to tackle?
I think there's a segment that I'm particularly drawn to, and that is the youth. And I look at high school teens and then early adults, young adults, and just kind of where they're at in their life stage for those that don't have a lot of resources, especially those that are coming out of the foster system. I think there is a great need for the kids who have aged out of the foster system to find and be able to be given resources to be able to make that next stage of their life a successful one.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the kids that come out of the foster care system end up homeless because they don't have a lot of resources and ways to get to their next step. Very few of them get to go to college. And so there's just a lot of limits that are placed on them because of their life circumstances. So I think that's one area that I think I would like to focus on, and maybe our church can, figure out ways to serve that part. There's some great groups out there that are helping single women, helping young families, helping the homeless, so there's a lot of good out there, and but there's always, Jesus said himself, he says, the harvest is ripe, but the workers are few. And so in any endeavor, there's way more need than there are people that are willing to fill it. And so, gosh, if all of the churches could just figure out a way of how they can mobilize and get into the community and serve and be like Jesus, I think we would see a revival like we've never seen in the world.
I know Wings of Grace, Doug over at Wings of Grace is doing some work with, hopefully trying to serve that segment. But, that's one ministry, and I'm sure they could use a lot more support. I'd be curious to look in to see, who else is working out in that need. But yeah, great points. I totally agree with you. Brevard has a fairly large de-churched population. And so a lot of those are youth that used to attend church and no longer do. Given that, maybe tell people a little bit if they're interested in checking you guys out. How can they find you? How can they attend a service, get in contact with you, that sort of thing?
So anyone who would like to get involved with us, the main way, you can check us out online at spacecoastchurch.com. Once you're there on our site, there's the events page. You can click on there and then find whatever's going on in our calendar that you would like to be a part of. If it's a regular Sunday service, we're meeting at the Cinema World Theater on 192 in Melbourne. If you want to join us for one of our service Sundays, Each of those locations have their own event page that you can sign up on and get the details as far as time and location, etc. And we definitely are open to anyone who wants to serve in any of those areas. My contact information, my email, all that stuff is on the website as well. It's Jose@spacecoastchurch.com. I'm happy to just connect and grab a coffee with whoever's willing to serve, and just really grateful for any opportunity that the Lord puts in front of us to be able to connect.
Thank you so much for the conversation, Jose. Blessings for Space Coast Church.